Cool. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Graph Apps today, and how you can build one for yourself. So like I said, my name is Adam Cowley. I'm a developer experience engineer on the developer relations team at Neo4j. So I'm going to talk you through the concept of what a Graph App is, give you some examples of what Graph Apps are, and then we'll look at how you can start today with building one. So for the people that don't know, have never heard the term Graph App before. So anybody that's downloaded Neo4j, chances are you've downloaded Neo4j Desktop. So Neo4j Desktop is a user interface that allows developers to manage multiple projects and graphs on their local computers, and also manage connections to remote databases. And Graph Apps are an extension of Neo4j Desktop. And they allow you to interact with the databases that the user's configured through an API. So you have the Graph Apps pane on the left-hand side, so the four squares. So this is where your Graph Apps live. You can launch any Graph Apps that you have installed in Neo4j Desktop by clicking the little icon next to the name of the app. If you have an active graph, then there's a drop-down menu next to there, so you can choose the Graph App from there. Or you can launch a Graph App using the command bar. So there's a little magnifying glass in the top right-hand corner. Or you can use the keyboard shortcut, so Command and K on a Mac or Control and K on Windows. And then that will open up the command bar, and then you can just type in the name of the app. So under the hood, the Graph Apps are single-page applications, so built with HTML and JavaScript, and optionally the front-end framework of your choice. And these Graph Apps are served through a Chromium browser. For a list of all of the available Graph Apps we have at the moment, you can go to install.graphapp.io, which is our Graph App gallery, where you can go see a few of the examples of the apps, and you can click to install those apps, view more information about them, or view the source code. You can also open up the Graph App gallery as its own Graph App inside Neo4j Desktop as well, from the latest version. So once you clicked install, your Graph Apps will be listed on the left-hand side in the Graph Apps pane. And you can install a Graph App by using the install form at the bottom. So you can either paste a link to a website or a remotely hosted Graph App. You can post a link to an NPM repository, and then it will install and auto-update for you. Or you can drag and drop a tar archive in there to install. So the kind of people that are building Graph Apps, so Neo4j has built a set of functional Graph Apps for you to use in your day-to-day life, and converted some standalone tools into Graph Apps. Anybody that's used Neo4j so far has most likely used Neo4j Browser. So Neo4j Browser is a tool that allows you to run Cypher queries against a database and visualize those results. So you can either visualize those in a force graph layout or just in table format. And it allows you to sort of explore the database, double click to expand, and things like that. If code is not your favorite thing, then we have Neo4j Bloom. So what Neo4j Bloom allows you to do is to explore the graph without writing a line of code. So as you type into the search bar at the top, Bloom will examine the database and then suggest appropriate labels, relationship types, and properties in there. So you don't have to write any code. You just need to know about the data model. And this is also great for large-scale visualizations, and allows you to do more advanced customization than you would do inside Neo4j Browser. You can set different colors and icons, sizes of the nodes, thickness of the relationships, and things like that. So the Neo4j Labs team are building educational Graph Apps as well. So if you're brand new to graph databases at the moment, then the Graph Gallery is a great place to look for inspiration. So the Graph Gallery features a curated list of use cases. So there are over 100 in there at the moment, all categorized by use case and industry. And each of the examples has a player's browser guide button. And what that will do is that will allow you to step through the example inside Neo4j Browser and load in data as you go. There's the Graph Algorithms Playground, which was built by my colleagues Mark and Irfan. And what this allows you to do is to explore the graph algorithms that we have inside the Graph Data Science Library. And it allows you to test them and then to preview the effects that they have on your data set. I won't go into any more detail, but if you're interested in graph algorithms, then I head to neo4j.com/graph algorithms book right now. And then for the next month, you can download this book for free. So we've also built some useful graph apps for your day-to-day life. So one of my favorite graph apps is Halin, built by David Allen. And what Halin does is it allows you to monitor Neo4j and then displays some useful metrics, things like CPU usage, memory usage in charts, and then helps you to diagnose the common configuration and performance problems. And it also allows you to administer databases as well. So Neo4j consultants are also building graph apps that make their lives easier, and then hopefully yours as well. So one that I've used quite a lot while I've been working with clients is the database analyzer and the query log analyzer. So the database analyzer gives you a graphical representation of your data model along with some database statistics. And the query log analyzer gives you a friendly view of the query logs, so you can identify and fix slow running queries before you know they're a problem. But it's not just us internally. We have partners and other companies that are building graph apps as well. For example, we have Graph XR by the team at Kinabiz. So Graph XR is a tool that allows you to visualize graph data in a number of formats, including like a 3D force graph layout, which is really nice, and then maps and charts as well. So you can create some configuration and then share those visualization with other people inside your company. And they've also done some great visualizations, some great work around COVID-19 visualization as well. So I'd recommend going there and checking out that blog post and the visualization that they've done. If you prefer to build your own UIs, then the YWorks Neo4j Explorer is one for you. So basically, it demonstrates the capabilities of Y files. So Y files is a JavaScript visualization library, and it provides you with a number of off-the-shelf features and visualization options. So we have community members that are building graph apps as well. So for example, NeoMap is a great tool for visualization spatial data on Neo4j. So you can build up layers of markers, polygons, heat maps, and then display them on a map. And this can make for some really interesting visualizations. So you might be thinking, now, right, I'm sold. How do I get started? So I'm here to help with that. I recently published a developer guide to graph apps. So if you go to neo4j.com/developer/graph app development, then there should be a comprehensive guide there for you. And there are also some example graph apps inside the Graph App Starter Kit on GitHub. So essentially what you will do when you create your graph app, so regardless of framework choice or anything else, you'll go through this flow. So what you'll do is you'll first go and enable developer mode inside Neo4j. So your first step is to open up the settings pane using the cog icon in the bottom left. Tick the box to enable development mode, and then configure the entry point and the root path of your project. So, for example, here I've got something served over localhost 8080, and then the root path should correspond to the path of your project. But if in doubt, you can just put a slash there, and everything will be fine. Once you've enabled development mode, then the development app will display on the drop-down menu next to the open button. And again, you can also open this using the command bar, using Command and K or Control and K, or click in the magnifying glass. Type in development app, and then it'll open for you. So once you've done that, you can then create your first project. So in this case, I'm just creating a new directory and then creating an index HTML file in there. So you can use a framework like React or Angular or Vue, but you can always just use jQuery or just vanilla JavaScript if necessary. So in this case, I've got a single file, and then the idea around this graph app is to show a count of the number of nodes inside the database. So we've just got a basic HTML page here with a little bit of text in there, and then we have a strong tag with the ID of count, which will add the count into. So opening this up in the developer app will show you a screen a little bit like this. So right now you can see that we've got the database count. It says there are an unknown number of nodes inside the database. When you're in development mode, you get this black bar across the top. And then you have some useful buttons there. So the button to click to reload the app, or there's a button for app developer tools, and that opens things like the console and the network tab and things like that. Cool. So the first step is to retrieve the context from Neo4j. So the context provides you with a few things that may be useful for the app. So for example, the user's configuration, any projects that they've created, and even any activation keys that they may have that relate to your project. At any one time, there will be one single active graph. So this is one that you've clicked start or set active on. And in order to find this inside the code, what you would do is you would then run a reduce and then a find on the project's key inside the context in order to find the graph. So each of the graphs supplies some information about the graph's configuration. So for example, the name and the status you can see there. And there's also a connection property, and this will hold the connection details of how to connect to that graph. So for example, we can take the active connection and then go through the configuration and the protocols and then bolt in order to find the URL of the Neo4j database. That could be localhost or it could be a remote URL. And then the username and password that you connect to. So then you create a single instance of the Neo4j JavaScript driver using that URL, and then by creating a basic authentication token with the username and password. And then you create sessions through that driver and then start to query the database. So in this case, I'm just running a simple query to match all of the nodes and then return a count of them, and then returns the result. So to hook that all into this basic app, I include in the Neo4j driver, so in this case from unpackage.com. I use the Neo4j desktop API to get the context. Then when the context resolves, I run a reduce on the projects to then concatenate it all into one big list, and then use the find on that resulting list or on that resulting array to find the database where the database status is active. Then return that. So then inside the next section of the promise, I have the active database. So then I pull out the URL, username and password, and then use that to create a driver. Then create a session, run match n, return count n to find a count of all of the nodes inside the database. And then once that is resolved, I then use document.getElementById by ID to get that strong tag, and then set the inner HTML to be the count. So the result will look a little bit like this. So we've got the database count there of, in this case, I had 36,062 nodes in the database. So that's all you need to do to build the graph app. The next stage is to deploy it. So there are three ways that you can deploy a graph app. So you can create a TGZ file. So for example, use an npm pack on your npm project. You can publish the package to npm, and then people will be able to install that package via npm. Or you can host the graph app online. So for example, Halen I mentioned earlier is a graph app which is hosted online. Or you can use the version which is published on npm. And by the way, once you've done this, contact us, and we can put your graph into the your graph app into the graph app gallery. Cool. So the structure of the tar file should look something like this. So you should have a package.json file, and then a dist folder, which will include the index.html file plus any other assets that your app requires. So the package.json file is essentially something you'd use inside your NPM project. So this holds information about the project itself, but there are also a few little things inside that that are important for Neo4j Desktop. So there's a Neo4j Desktop item, which allows you to define the desktop API version, and also allows you to define things like permissions if you're using anything like that. So next thing we have is sort of similar to a progressive web app, a PWA. So we have a manifest.json. So this holds some basic metadata, which is read by desktop, and then is used in the display of the graph app inside desktop. So any values inside this file will overwrite anything defined in package.json. So for example, if you have the Neo4j desktop key and then the API version, then the manifest will overwrite the package.json. So a manifest.json file may look something like this. So for example, we have the name, which relates over to the name of the graph app, the version number, which comes from package.json, which is useful. And then we have, for example, the icons, so we can create an array of icons, which then get used inside the UI. So optionally, you can also define plugin dependencies. So for example, if your graph app, like most Neo4j projects, relies on APOC, then you can define that inside the plugin dependencies inside the manifest. So this is an array of strings, which is essentially just an array of coordinates to Maven Central plugins. So you can also include activation keys. So these are JET tokens, so JSON enablement tokens, kind of similar to a JOT token. And you can use these essentially to unlock certain pieces of functionality inside the app. So you could use it to monetize the app, or maybe provide beta features to certain people. So if you've installed Neo4j Desktop, then you would have either knowingly or unknowingly used an activation key. So one is required for Neo4j Desktop. And if you are a Neo4j Bloom user as well, then you would have had to have added in an activation key for Neo4j Bloom before you could use it. So each activation key has a feature name, which relates to the name of your app, and that corresponds to the name in package.json. And then the feature version is a SEM value for the range of the app versions that the key is valid for. And then so it holds certain information around the user, for example, their email and their name. And then the other important thing in there is the scope. So the scope provides a string, which is a set of features separated by space. And this would be what you would then use to either enable or disable areas inside the UI. So for example, this could be a pro user, and then that could open up I don't know, maybe a count of relationships as well as the count of nodes. So once you've built your graph app, you can also provide deep links. So you can use the Neo4j schema, and that will allow you to create links to other graph apps or from other websites to your graph app itself. So to link to your graph app, then you would use the name from package.json after the Neo4j scheme. You can provide a link to Neo4j browser. So you would use Neo4j-browser for that. And you can also add in commands and arguments as well. So for example, in this case, we're instructing Neo4j browser to open up the movies browser guide when it opens up. You can open it up pre-filled with a Cypher query as well. So you use the command of edit, and then the arg is the actual query itself. And you can chain these along as well. So you can say arg equals, and then the first query, semicolon, and ampersand arg equals, and then the second query, and then it will load them up for you. You can provide a deep link into Bloom. So in this case, you'd use Neo4j-Bloom as the name. And then you can optionally as well provide a search parameter. And then what this will do is it will take the URL encoded string and then put that into the search bar inside inside Bloom, so you don't have to type it in yourself. And then you'll get like a little view like there is, and then at the bottom of the screen. So that's pretty much all of the info I've got on how to create an app. So there are some examples. Feel free to reach out to me. We have a Graph Apps category on the Neo4j community site. So when you start to build your app, if you're interested in building an app, you don't really know what you want to do. Maybe you want to contribute to Martin's project. Then maybe you can come along here. We can work out a way to get started. And also let us know how the experience could be better for you. Cool. Yeah, so that is everything I have. If anyone is interested in something more in depth, if anyone would like to see any examples, feel free to reach out to me. I'm adam@neo4j.com or Adam Cowley on Twitter, or join the community and join the conversation.